So, how's your week been? I asked you earlier. Has it been crazy busy? For some of you it has? Yeah. Well, my week has been crazy busy, and we go on holiday tomorrow. And I'm sure for some of you can relate, particularly those of you with the family, that sometimes the energy required to get organised to go away actually defeats the whole purpose. Look at the weather out there. I've got piles of washing to do this afternoon so that I can actually pack some clothes to take away for a week. And I know for many of you, you get that. You know exactly, don't you girls? You know exactly what's I know some of you guys can work the washing machine. I know. So as well as trying to get organised to go away, obviously that has meant here at church, trying to get organised so that we're leaving things, so that everything's organised, and Debbie and Blair and Lashana and Renee don't have to do too much of our work. Obviously trying to get organised for next Sunday. It's been the school holidays, as you all will be aware, I'm sure, which is really good because it means in the holidays, Matt and I don't have to get up quite so early to get the kids. Well, actually, Matt doesn't have to get up quite so early. He does the morning stuff, yay. But it's just as well that it's been, that we've been able to sleep in a bit because, of course, in the school holidays, we will end up staying up so much later. I don't know what it's like in your house, but in our house, that's often what happens. I'm just going to give you a quick idea, and I know you'll be able to relate to some of this, of what this week's been like. So, for example, the other night, Gabby and Nathan and Caitlin decided they would bake a cake, and they started at 9:30 p.m. That same morning, I got woken up at 2 a.m. because Matt was snoring. He's not here, so it's okay. I didn't realise he was getting the flu, so it was particularly bad snoring. So I got up thinking I'll go and sleep on the couch downstairs. I get downstairs, it's 2 a.m. and Jack and Dennis are still up, playing PlayStation, determined to stay up all night because it's the school holidays. Well, obviously I said, I'm sleeping on that couch, get out. Get yourselves off to bed. So the house this week has been full of teenagers. It's been perpetually trashed. I've also been the chief taxi driver, so I've been juggling work and home, and nothing to back me up, and da-da-da-da. And the other day I decided, in my great wisdom, to take the kids to West Wave because the pool's there, cool. So I dropped them off, that was fine. Long story. But on the way home, of course, we hit traffic and an accident. So we spent forever in the car. And I thought we'd be home by about 4:35. We were home just after 6. And of course, in the back seat, I've got Gabby stressing out because she's going to the movies at 6:30 and she's not going to be home in time. Drama. So, crazy busy. Juggling here, juggling home, juggling kids. We've had drama at work this week, and that's just always the way it is. We've had people very sick and in hospital. Some of you will know that Steve Blakey has double bypass surgery tomorrow, so please continue to pray for him. And there's other stuff which I can't tell you anything about. This week I spent about 8 hours preparing a $10,000 application to Tyndall. Hopefully we're going to get some money for the drop-in centre. Been organising Christmas stuff. Had an appointment with the Territorial Secretary, which required preparing a lengthy document. Matt and I have had plenty of fights this week. We've had drama with the kids. Matt and Nathan have a squabble. And when they have a squabble, it affects everybody. The cat puked in Gabby's room. The washing got wet. And you know what happens then? You've got to bring it in, spin it, and do it all over again. Chris's girlfriend Ashley needed a new flat. And thank you to all of you who've prayed. We're moving her this afternoon. Awesome. Great. And in the midst of all this, some of you know, I had blood pressure issues. So I had to go to the doctor this week and blood tests, and now they've put me on little pills. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on. Couldn't I? I could go, no, M&Ms don't help any. I could go on and on and on. And you all understand where I'm coming from, don't you? This is life, isn't it? This is life. It sounds familiar to you. And on top of all of this, guess what I had to do this week? I had to prepare a message on slowing down. Oh God. The irony. Well, last week, for those of you who were here, Matt spoke about Sabbath rest, or true rest, in the biblical sense. We live in a world that suggests that recreation activities and leisure activities or escapism are rest, but true spiritual rest involves making the time to intentionally stop and be still and reflect on matters of life and faith. Okay? We often think in this world, if I choose a leisure activity or if I put on a movie or whatever, yes, those things can be restful physically, but for true spiritual soul refreshing, we need to intentionally make time to reflect on life and faith. And Matt left you with some challenging questions last week, and he reminded us of Jesus' words that man was not made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath for the man. In other words, God didn't make the Sabbath, God made the Sabbath so that we could rest. Okay? Do you get what I'm saying? Not the other way around. In other words, God designed us to take a break. And he modelled it right from creation. What did he do? He created, and on the seventh day he rested. That's right. So if it's good enough for God, the creator of the universe, to take a rest, it's important for us to recalibrate our lives, to refresh our souls, to connect with God. And this morning, I just want to build a little bit on that idea. My message this morning is called Be Still. We're going to play Freeze this morning, so be still. I love the psalm that Matt read to us. And I don't know if you noticed, but it's a crazy psalm. It's got all these images of utter chaos and disaster and doom and destruction. And yet right in the middle, there are these two words. Be still. Be still. So let me read it to you again. See if you notice. Just see what you notice. I'm going to read it to you again. So God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fail. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in an uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Be still and know that I am God. I don't know if you noticed, but throughout that psalm, the psalmist is using words to describe the situation or the circumstances. Words like trouble, words like fear, words like mountains crumbling, water roaring, mountains in an uproar, kingdoms falling, desolations and war, fire, to describe the circumstances, to describe what's going on. And in the midst of all of this, we see the psalmist uses other words to describe God. Did you notice that? So God is described as a refuge. He's described as strength. He's described as help. He's described as a fortress. And in the middle of it all, did you notice the speech marks? So in the middle of it all, in verse 10, God speaks and he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. There's all this stuff going on. And then there's God, he speaks, and there's little speech marks in the middle of the psalm. Be still and know that I'm God. I'm a big fan of the Message version, Eugene Peterson's version of the Bible. And he says this in that verse 10. He says, step out of the traffic. Take a long, loving look at me, your high God, above politics, above everything. That's pretty cool, isn't it? It's a great way, particularly for me, who've been stuck in traffic this week. I get that. Be still. Step out of the traffic. Be still and know that I am God. Step out of the traffic and take a long, loving look at me. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Step out of the traffic. Take a long, loving look at me. Your high God. Above politics, dirty politics included. Above everything. Above everything. Thelma Hall writes in her book, Too Deep for Words. Are you ready for this? I'm going to be reading to you this morning a bunch of quotes from some of our generation's how would we describe them? Some of the great contemplative Christians of our age, okay? And this is one of these ladies. In her book, Too Deep for Words, she says this: to grow in prayer and to deepen our relationship with God, it is essential that we carve out every day some substantial time for interior stillness and silence in prayer and remain faithful to it as a true priority. Flexibility will be necessary, of course, but it must have as its principle and centre our love relationship with God. Lovers do not schedule time to be together, they make it happen, knowing that no deep relationship is possible or can endure and grow without it. For the immanent God may be discovered, but the transcendent God must reveal himself. What does that mean? The immanent God. God is here, now, with us by his Holy Spirit, closer than a brother, known to us, leading us and guiding us. But he's also transcendent. He's out there above it all. He is majestic and he is mysterious. He is holy. He is awesome. He is beyond our finite minds to comprehend. Don't know about you, but I still want to know him. And he will reveal himself if we are still enough and quiet enough for long enough. So this morning, we're going to endeavour to think about silence and solitude in a very contrived group context this morning. So the goal this morning is to put some thoughts out there for you to ponder and think on as we introduce for some of you this idea of the discipline of silence and solitude, and build on that discipline for many others of you who I know already find this particularly helpful. Can someone turn off the heaters? Is it just me or is it being really warm? Thank you. So, this story of Elijah. Who's read 1 Kings 19? Great story. Cool. If you haven't, go home and read 1 Kings 19. It's a great story. So 1 Kings 19 tells the story of Elijah. And Elijah has just had a crazy busy week. He's had a really rough time because the Israelites had turned away from God and have basically made a mess of everything, including killing all of God's prophets, except for Elijah. So he's the only one left. The only one left. Many of you will be familiar with the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal, he has this amazing standoff trying to prove that his God is real and all these false gods are powerless. It's an incredible story, and there's Elijah calling down fire from heaven, and it's pretty good reading, so you should read it. 1 Kings 19. It's an amazing story. But of course, even after Elijah has this big moment on Mount Carmel, calling down the fire of God and proving his existence, he's still not done. I think this must have been the most exhausting part of his week. Elijah then rounds up all the false prophets of Baal. And as we read in the King James Version, are you ready? He slew them all. I think that'd be pretty exhausting, don't you? And this is all part of purifying the nations, and yeah, it's pretty intense stuff. But he slew them all, okay? So I think Elijah's pretty exhausted by now. Big encounter on Mount Carmel. Would have taken a while, I'm sure, to slay all the prophets of Baal. Now, of course, he's the last prophet of God left, the last one. And Queen Jezebel, she's pretty upset about this and is not happy that he's killed off all of her prophets. And so she puts a hit out on him. And I'm not just talking about a wanted dead or alive kind of hit out. I'm talking about a wanted dead or dead, nothing else but dead kind of hit out on Elijah. So, if you were Elijah, what's the first thing you would do? Yay, me too. So, Elijah freaks out and he flees out into the wilderness. A very human, logical response. So he's been working hard for God and he's burnt out. He's exhausted. He's running literally for his life. And finally he collapses under a tree and he has it out with God. He says, enough's enough. And Elijah's done in. He's disillusioned. Where are you in all this, God? I've just done this amazing thing on Mount Carmel, proved your existence, and now they're going to kill me. Hello, God, where are you in all this? And Elijah actually asks God to take his life. So this is a big moment for Elijah. He's done. He's done. And he asks God to take his life. The very life he's been fleeing to preserve. He asks God to take his life. He is pretty messed up. So Elijah falls asleep. And when he awakes, God sends some angels to feed him and quench his thirst. He sleeps some more. They feed him again, telling him he's going to need strength for the journey ahead. And sure enough, when he wakes, he sets out on a 40-day journey up Mount Horeb, which is the mountain of God. In other words, Elijah is off to speak with God. He's off to have it out with God, and he heads up the mountain. And after 40 days and 40 nights, he finds a cave, and God meets with him. You read in verse 9. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah. What are you doing here, Elijah? And he replied, I've been very zealous, you think, for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant and broken down your altars and put your prophets to death with the sword. And I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. The Lord said, go and stand out on the mountain pass in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Remember, this is the Trinity talking within himself, if you're wondering about all that. So that's what Elijah did. And then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face. God was not in all the noise. God was not in all the noise. He was a gentle whisper. Many of you will be familiar with the King James Version words. He was a still, small voice. Some translations say a gentle whisper, the gentle blowing, a still small voice. God was in the sound of sheer silence, another translation says. Whatever translation we use, God was not in the noise. In his book, The Big Silence, Christopher Jameson says this: if you want to be deeply connected with yourself and with God, you must spend time in silence. We all know this. Throughout the New Testament, Jesus modelled this to us. And if ever there was someone whose life was crazy busy, if ever there was someone whose life had incredible demands on it, if ever there was a public figure, Jesus was always in the midst of the crowds. But we see throughout the New Testament, there are those times where he's getting away from the crowds. There are those times when Jesus has gone to be alone and the crowds find him. But Jesus' secret, and I read from the beginning of the book of Mark. And the book of Mark, incidentally, is known as the action gospel. Okay, it's if you think about it when you read Mark, it's miracle after drama with the Pharisees. It's the action gospel. But right at the beginning, we discover Jesus' secret to being close to the Father in all of this. Mark 1:35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, turned off his cell phone, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. In Matthew 6, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells his disciples, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And what is the reward? Over the years, I've always thought the reward for prayer was answers. But you know what I've discovered? The older I get, I'm 40 next year. The older I get, the more I understand that it's not always about answers. It's about the transforming presence of God. It's about the refreshing of the soul. And sometimes it's just a wordless exchange with God. God is the answer. Yes, he provides us with answers, but his presence, for me now, more often than not, the practice of stopping in itself and being with God is the answer. That's the reward. God, Jesus is our reward. Knowing him is our reward. Drawing strength from him is our reward. Henry Nouwen, another one of the great contemplatives of our time, says this. I think we can all relate to this one. The further the outward journey takes you, the deeper the inward journey must go. Only when your roots are deep can your fruits be abundant. Yeah? It's a shame Vian's not here today because I was going to talk about her and I'm still going to do it. Those of you who know Vian will know that this is very much, as soon as I read this is what Vian, how she practices her spiritual life. Some of the stuff she deals with in the drop-in centre, having had to fill in for her on occasion, it's emotionally draining, dealing with people in desperate need or listening to people's problems. And Vian does that so faithfully. But you know what? At 2 o'clock when the centre closes, she is still. You know, she'll sit at the puzzle table, she'll put some worship music on, and she'll be still and take some time to restore her soul. Sometimes I turn up on a Saturday afternoon after the workers have all gone, and she'll be in her office, singing away to God, thinking no one's in the building. And I often come in and I hear her singing away to God, restoring her soul. And for very much these reasons, she's got a job and a ministry that requires so much, but she does it in God's strength. And I think we all know the fruit of that. Vian has created space in her life to be with God, to enjoy Him, to be refreshed and recalibrated, and to hear from Him. There's another little quote from Henry Newen. In this spiritual life, the word discipline means the effort to create some space in which God can act. Discipline means to prevent everything in your life from being filled up. Discipline means that somewhere you're not occupied, and certainly not preoccupied, to create that space in which something can happen that you hadn't planned or counted on. Now, most of you know that being still isn't easy for me, but I want to testify to you this morning that I'm getting used to it and that it's having incredible benefit in my life. Since my breakdown a couple of years ago, most of you know about that, I've been tentatively exploring this whole idea of silence and solitude. And you see, for me, when I had that breakdown a few years ago, life at that time had become so unmanageable. It was so filled up. My spirit was so dry. And I knew that something drastic needed to change, but I didn't know entirely what it was. And for me, I'm an A-type personality. I'm an achiever and an activist and a doer. I had literally reached the end of myself, had reached the end of my reserves, had reached the end of what I knew to do. And I remember when I was really unwell, praying my heart out. But I realised now I needed something more. God was about to show me that next level. And I know this morning there may be some of you in this room and you know that there's something missing in your spiritual life, or you're desperate for something more. You're wondering, is this all it is? Well, I want to suggest to you this morning that you may be like I was. You may be about to have an Indiana Jones moment. Let me read this little quote. Sometimes we reach a point at which we know that if we go any further, we will either lose our faith or creak through to a new dimension of faith that goes beyond creedal or doctrinal believing to authentic, personal trust. In other words, from what we know of God to what we know of God. Like Indiana Jones, we come up to the edge of the abyss and there is no bridge. Only when we step out with one foot into the yawning chasm of unknowing does the bridge appear. Are you at the edge of the abyss this morning, wondering what's next? Well, I've got news for you this morning. Good news. There is more, but you're going to have to be intentional about it. You have to really want it. And it has to be about your desire for God. David Benner says this: willpower may be sufficient for superficial behavioural changes, but only desire is capable of leading you toward deeper authenticity and integrity. No one drifts into such a life. No one drifts into such a life without intentionality, commitment, and a persistent desire to become more. Our desires keep us molten, they keep us moving, and they keep us awake, sometimes in the middle of the night when we prefer to be asleep. I know that there are people in this room this morning who God wakes up in the middle of the night to pray. I also know, some of you have told me, that there are people in this room who God wakes up in the middle of the night to pray, who roll over and go back to sleep. But there are also the people who get up. And these are the people who get up because they know they're going to meet with God. And they'd rather get up in the middle of the night than miss that. Their desire for His presence is greater than their desire for sleep. For others of you in the room this morning, you get up early. You like Jesus. You get up early, go to a solitary place, whatever that might be, and you meet with God. You pray. In our house, that's Matt. He gets up early. Not early, but we've got teenagers. Early's taking on a whole new dimension these days. But Matt, he has his quiet time in the morning. For me, I'm normally the first person in our house to go to bed, but I don't go to bed to sleep. I normally take some time when I get up to my room to be alone with God, to write in my journal, to think and reflect before Matt comes up and says, "Have you finished being holy? Can I watch TV now?" But we've relaxed into a pattern that works. It works for both of us now. We've relaxed into a pattern that works for both of us. The other time for me is often after school. You know, when you've picked up your kids, they're in the door, they're fed, they've squabbled, you nag them about homework, and then they sort of go quiet for a bit. And often I'll go upstairs then and just breathe, just have a little moment. And I want to say to you this morning, something happens when we are still. And I have learned, this is a proven thing in my life, I've learned this. You see, I've tried instant coffee Jesus. Okay, I've tried instant coffee Jesus. I've tried drive-through Jesus on the go. But there is no substitute for taking the time to grind the beans and enjoy the aroma as the flavour is released and brewed, and then settle in for a good, long, deep and meaningful, uninterrupted coffee with Jesus. But sometimes we all settle for instant coffee Jesus, don't we? Because it does the trick. It's, you know, instant coffee Jesus does the trick, but it's not the same. It leaves us wanting more. So I want to share with you this morning now some of my experience on retreat. So some of you know that a couple of weeks ago I had the amazing privilege of going away for a whole week on a spiritual retreat. And it was a retreat for Salvation Army officers, and it was held at a retreat centre just out of Featherston at the bottom of the historic Rimatucket Incline. And when the invitation came out via email for the first 20 people to sign up, I knew I had to go. It was like God was summoning me, and I just knew I had to go. So I went, and God was there waiting for me. When I first arrived, this was on one of the doors, and it says of retreat, "Times of extended retreat give us a chance to come home to ourselves and God's presence, and to bring the realities of our life to God in utter privacy. This is important for us and for those we serve. On retreat, we rest in God and wait on Him to do what is needed, and eventually we return to the battle with fresh energy and keener insight." And I have to say, in all honesty, that's exactly what happened for me. Although some of you might be wondering about the keener insight part. "Oh, Jack, morning." So I want to share a little bit with you this morning about that, because I discovered while I was away that God, and I want you to hear this part, that God doesn't call us to be still to make it difficult for us to know Him, or hard for us to encounter Him. Okay? God doesn't call us to be still to make it hard for us. He doesn't call us to be still to make it difficult for us to encounter Him or know Him. He's not trying to annoy us or make it difficult. He's trying to help us. And God knows that what we need to refresh our soul and recalibrate is His presence. And it's not found in all the noise. Pascal, the famous 17th century scientist, said, "All the unhappiness of men and women arises from one single fact, that they cannot stay quiet in their room." The reason for this inability, Pascal says, is the natural poverty of our feeble and mortal condition, so miserable that nothing can comfort us when we think closely. And so in order not to think of it closely, we turn to what Pascal calls diversion to distract us. And remember, he's writing in a time well before computers and the internet. Pascal says, "Hence it comes people so much love noise and stir. Hence it comes that the prison is so horrible a punishment. Hence it comes that the pleasure of solitude is a thing incomprehensible." And he goes on to observe, "But humankind has another secret instinct, a remembrance of the greatness of our original nature, which teaches that happiness in reality consists only in rest and not being stirred up. This instinct conflicts with the drive to diversion, and we develop the confused idea that leads us to aim at rest through excitement, through recreation, through leisure, through escapism. And Matt talked a little bit about that last week. And when God talks about being still and resting in Him and having a Sabbath, He's not talking about filling our lives up with other stuff. He's talking about being alone with Him, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Ruth Haley Barton carries on from what Pascal was saying, and she says it's a fallacy to think that we just need more time. You know, we all think, I could do that if we just had more time. I could be still if we just had more time. But Ruth says, unless a deeper solution is found, more time will just fill up in the same way as the time we already have has. I see a few nods in the room, yes. What is needed, the way to liberation and rest, lies only through a decision and a practice. And I want to suggest to you this morning strongly that through the timeless practices and spiritual disciplines of solitude and silence, God reveals truth. God reveals truth. And sometimes it's truth we don't want to hear. But if we want to grow and become the people He created us to be, we have to face our stuff. So through the timeless practices of silence and solitude, God reveals the truth about Himself and His character, and even more terrifying, the truth about us. The truth about our sin, the truth about our circumstances, and for me, on retreat, the truth of my unbelief in some areas of God's character. But thankfully, when we are still and quiet, He also brings healing, revelation, grace, and hope. And that's been my experience. And, Margaret Trainer. We've just reset the prayer room this week with a bit of a contemplative theme. So if some of the stuff I'm sharing this morning sort of resonates with you, come and use the prayer room and literally be still and quiet for some time. Margaret wrote this on the wall, a real gem, and it says, learn to listen to God. There is all the time in the world for jobs. The urgency is to listen to God. Acts 17, 26 to 27. God made the earth hospitable with plenty of free time and space for living, so that we could seek after God and not just grope around in the darkness, but actually find Him. He's not remote, He's near. So, I'm going to give you an example of what happened to me on retreat a couple of weeks ago. So, I went away for 4 nights and 5 days. Yeah. And on day 3 of the retreat, we were just starting to get into the seriousness of these periods of silence. And so by the end of the week, we had this 24-hour period of silence, which included silent meals. Can you imagine? It was amazing. Anyway, by the 3rd day, I went on a prayer walk, and took 3 days, I could just start to feel myself actually really really, it was great. But on day 3, I also realised, God showed me quite clearly, that there was something about God I just didn't believe. And at one-to-one spiritual direction, I was given some homework to do. And over the week, everything was very fluid. I didn't have to do it. Nothing was compulsory. But I felt as much from God that I needed to do this little exercise because of this aspect of God's character I've been doubting. And I want to say, one of the cool things about retreat is it's okay to be really honest. And the things that you're really struggling, it's okay to say, I'm not sure if I believe it. So the task I was given by my spiritual director was to look to the book of Psalms and was to go through and reflect on all the descriptions of God. So I got out a pen and paper, and I got started. And this is Psalms 1 to 40, quite a few pages here. Okay, not the actual Psalms itself, but some of the things it says about God. For example, He's my refuge, He saves and delivers, He decrees justice, He rules on high, He's merciful, He's utterly terrifying. He sees my trouble and grief. He helps the fearless. He listens to my cry. He promises the nations will be my inheritance. He's a shield. He is my hope. He hates wrong. His love is unfailing. You get the idea, don't you? He lives. He's to be exalted. He's my saviour. The Lord confides in those who fear him. He is strong and mighty. He blesses. He's a shepherd. His voice is powerful. He is our help. He's our shield. He answers. He saves. You get the idea. So I spent the morning going through the book of Psalms, and as I did this exercise, I was forced to stop every now and then and really consider if I knew that side of God, if I believed that side of God's character. Had I actually experienced that truth of that side of God in my own life? And I found myself over the morning celebrating the fact that I know that God. Yes, I've experienced that. Right through to, I don't know about that one. I wonder what it would be like to experience that in my own life. But it was cool. This revelation through God's word was coming, and I was beginning to be refreshed in my spirit. So back to lunch in the morning. Bear with me. The story's going to go somewhere cool. Bear with me. Lunch was in silence, which is really weird. And so I was able to continue this dialogue in my head with God without any interruption or distraction. And the night before, I decided that on this day I was going to do the Rimutaka Incline Walk. Now, some of you will know what that means, but the Rimutaka Incline is an old train track that's now become a walk, and there's tunnels up the top. It's a pretty cool walk. And so I decided I was going to go up into the tunnels, and I needed to arrange with someone to borrow their torch. So I got my torch. I was all sorted. I'd actually been on this walk years ago going in the other direction, so I knew what I was in for, and I was like, that'd be really cool. I'm really looking forward to my prayer walk with God, and it's going to be awesome. So I thought, and I also thought, all the stuff that I've been learning in the morning, I thought, it's going to be good. I'll be able to reflect on this and talk with God about it. It's going to be great. So I got organised. I was very sensible. I had my sturdy walking shoes and my jacket and my water bottle and my cell phone and my torch. I was all set. Signed myself out in the way I went. And when I left, it was sunny and gorgeous. It was a light breeze. It was lovely. So for the first 15 minutes, it was a lovely walk. And then it started to rain. Quite hard. Which meant I had to run uphill. Because I knew there was a shelter up at the first stop, because I'd walked there the day before. And so, breathing hard and pretty wet by now, I reached the shelter at the top of this little thing and collapsed in a heap. It was pelting down, and it was like little, the little train stations. It was a little train station shelter. So it's pelting with rain. Nothing I can do about the rain, obviously. I'd like to think I have great control over my life, but it's raining, can't do anything about it. All I can do is wait and be still and listen. And as my breathing slowed and I stared out to the rain and the bush from my cosy little bunker, God spoke to me. It wasn't an audible voice or anything like that, but I heard as clear as a bell the still, small voice of God, and he said to me, Jules, I'm your shelter, a refuge from the storm. And believe me, I was still after that. Was that one of those moments? I knew God had spoken to me. And I had this overwhelming sense of reverent fear that God was right there with me. And in my mind, I realised that in some of my darkest times, God has provided me with shelter and refuge. And a few things came to mind. And so I was able to sit there, and I don't know how long it rained, but to sit there with this reality that there's things that God says in his word, there's crap things I've been through, and now I could reflect and go, yes, God was my shelter. God was my refuge. So that was awesome. Really awesome. So it stopped raining. It was like God had it all planned for me. It stopped raining, and I thought, I'll keep going. So I started up the incline proper. So it's not steep, but it's a steady incline. And the incline is literally the old railway tracks. So I'm trudging up this hill, trudging up. And I know I'm going to get to the tunnels, because I've seen them before. I'm trudging up. I come to a bend and think, tunnels must be around the corner. Come around the corner, no tunnels. Trudge, another corner. They must be around the corner, no tunnels. Trudge. But as I'm trudging along, I come to a sign, and there's all these little historic signs along the way. And this one was explaining the engineering marvel that is the Rimutaka Incline. Now I'll try and get this right, but normal train track, 2 tracks, yeah? So on the Rimutaka Incline, someone invented, it's an amazing engineering feat, this thing called the fell. Basically it's a third track, this thing that sticks up. And when the train connects to this fell, it's strengthens, so the train is literally no longer just on the tracks, but attached to the tracks. And what happens is the train is able to go up the incline without tipping or falling or sliding back or whatever. But the catch is that when the fell connects to the train slows right down to about 6 kilometres an hour. How cool is that? So the fell literally keeps the train from falling off the tracks or sliding back, but it has to go really slow. And again, in that moment, I heard God saying, that still small voice, I am your strength. So just as the fell strengthened the train, I sensed God saying, I'm your strength. And the cool part was, I also sensed God saying, this incline is your ministry at East City. There's something exciting at the top, but it's going to be slow, and there are going to be times where you're going to need to be really strongly connected to me so you don't fall off the tracks or slip back. It was amazing, God using this incredible imagery to speak to me. And it was like, I will strengthen you like this fell in the train, but you must stay connected to me. And again, I'm just gobsmacked. It's like, wow, God's speaking to me. It's amazing. It was silent, like it was just me on the mountain. It was amazing. So I carry on, because I'm determined to get to these tunnels. I'm going to carry on, and I want to hear more from God. So I carry on up this mountain, and I keep thinking, where are these tunnels? I've been walking for 2 hours by now. It's like, where are these tunnels? I knew they were there. So finally, where is it? Yes, can I see the picture of the tunnel? Yay! Finally, I come to the first tunnel. Reach my destination. All that climbing uphill was worth it. I'm really excited. I'm like, woo, this is so cool, I'm so excited, I'm going to go over the tunnel. Obviously, I stop, I take photos, I get my torch out, and I'm all like, yes, this is fantastic. The girl who led me the torch, it was just a little one, but it was an LED one, so she was like, sweet, it's going to have great fun, it's cool. So, I start to make my way into the tunnel. Really excited, striding out. But if you look at that picture, can you see any light at the end of that tunnel? So I start walking, and I realise all of a sudden that it is really dark. And I've got my little torch, and I'm like, is it on? Oh, it's on, but it's not actually making any difference whatsoever. I literally couldn't see about a foot in front of me. And I had this moment of, oh my gosh, it's really dark, I'm not doing this on my own. And I turned around and ran out again. So glad there was no one to see. So I got to this amazing, this was my destination, this is what I've been walking towards this whole time, but I was absolutely petrified in this moment of, oh my gosh, it's dark and I'm scared, turned around and walked out. And suddenly I felt really alone and scared and vulnerable. And, there could have been anything in the tunnel waiting for me, this is what my mind's doing. And I started to walk back down the hill quickly thinking there could be anything in that tunnel now coming after me, as the mind goes. But, in that moment, God spoke to me. I believe He really tested me because I started walking down the hill, and I said out loud, I'm not going in there alone. So I'm walking down the hill, and clear as a bell, God said, you're not alone. But here was my test, the test of my complete unbelief. This was my moment. When God said, but you're not alone, do you know what I said back? And I said it out loud. Well, that's nice, God, that I'm not alone, but I need a human hand to hold on to go into there. You're not enough. Whoa. And as soon as I said that, it was that moment of, oh my gosh, do I really believe that God is always with me? So that's what I said. But you know what? And I keep walking down the hill, and you'll know that this was God when I tell you what He said, because there's no way I would have said it. Walking back down the hill, do you know what God said to me? Jules, we've been through darker things than this together. Jules, we've been through darker things, darker places than this together. Stopped me dead in my tracks. And suddenly all those psalms that I read in the morning just came back to me. I'm your fortress, I'm your strength, I'm your shield, I'm a stronghold, I'm a light for your path. And I had to stand there for a minute. Do I believe this stuff? Do I believe this stuff? Do I believe that He's always with me and that He is a light for my path? So I turned, because I do, very. So I turned around and headed back to the tunnel, and I started praying. You'll laugh. Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And so I walked slowly and determinedly and prayerfully, and literally hanging onto my little torch. And I walked. And it was just terrible. It was I know God's with me, I know God's with me. And as soon, honestly, I had to walk quite a way before the tunnel turned, and then I see the light. And as soon as I saw the light, boom, I was getting out the other side. It was an amazing moment for me and God. I got to the other side, and obviously I felt really elated. The serotonin and the endorphins were, doing their thing. And it was like, oh my gosh, of course I believe in who you are, God. And it doesn't mean you're not going to make me do hard things. Like go for a second time. And of course then I realised I had to go back through the tunnel and get back down. Or go eat to the next 2 times. So I went back through the tunnel, and it was fine. It was like, I know where this leads. I know it's dark, but I'm going to get to the other side. And sure enough, I did. So it was amazing. I encountered God on the side of the mountain where I needed him the most, in the darkest place. And I realised, of course, where else? And the next day as I reflected, it dawned on me that my most significant encounters with God have always taken place in the darkest times or the hardest times. And so I said to God, am I going to have to be scared and afraid all the time to encounter you? Thinking, and I sat with that for a little bit and pondered it. And then I realised that if that's how it has to be, then God can bring on the darkness, because I would rather meet him in the darkness than miss him in the light. And I knew that God could show me some of these things that week as healing, the last few years of my life, but also to strengthen me. And I'm so grateful for that. And so I'm not afraid anymore. The next day God gave me these scriptures, which most of you will be familiar with. Psalm 119. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. And in the Message version it says, by your words I can see where I am going. They throw a beam of light on my dark path. How cool is that? Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? And the Message says, with God on my side, I am fearless, afraid of nothing and no one. And God also showed me Isaiah 42, and the Message version says, don't be afraid, I've redeemed you, I've called your name, you're mine. When you're in over your head, I'll be there with you. When you're in rough waters, you will not go down. When you're between a rock and a hard place, love that, it won't be a dead end, because I am God, your personal God. Don't be afraid, I'm with you. God speaks to us, make no mistake, through his word, by his spirit, through our circumstances, through creation, through man-made engineering feats like the Rivertucker incline. God speaks. But we just have to be still and quiet enough to actually listen and hear. Job 33:14 says, God speaks again and again, though people do not recognise it. God speaks, but he's not in all the noise. And we have to make a decision and a choice about how much we want to be with him. I'm not a morning person, but I came into the prayer room on, I think it was Friday morning, just before 8. And I tell you what, an hour of being with God went really quick. And I really didn't want to come out and do work. But I know now how restorative and refreshing it is when I take even just 10 minutes just to be still and be quiet. And it's not about spelling off my big list of prayers, but just stopping and being with God. So my big idea for this morning is really simple: be still. Because through the timeless and proven spiritual disciplines of silence and solitude, God speaks. It's scary facing yourself and your stuff, but it's incredible to discover that the still small voice of God has not left us. And for me, the week I was away, I was just overwhelmed. It was like, during my crazy busy life, God, speak to me, God, God, ask me, speak to me. But when I actually shut up, he was speaking to me. So this morning, we're going to finish now, and I'm going to invite you just to listen for a bit. We're going to play a song called Be Still. And I invite you just to let the words really soak into your spirit. And then when the song finishes, I'm just going to read Psalm 47 again. And then we're just going to have a few minutes of silence. I know it'll be contrived and a bit weird, and you'll probably hear the kids banging around upstairs. But we're just going to take a minute this morning. And as we go into lunch this morning, I want to invite you on both the tables and around the walls. There are various quotes. On the tables there are brochures about lectodemina, praying the scriptures, cultivating the soul, centering prayer. There's some things there that journaling. You might look at, and I challenge you, just take one, don't take all of them. Just let God lead you, pick one and go, yeah, over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try this. Because they're all tools to help us stop and be still and listen to God. So I invite you to do that over lunch. Also want to remind you of the prayer room. Come in any time during the week and take some time to be alone with God. But we're going to play this song, Be Still. So let's take a few moments to be still and know that He is God.